The rain was relentless, a thick, cold, unforgiving sheet of water. It pounded against the windshield of Daniel's taxi with a fury, as if it was trying to drown the entire city. He pulled over at the edge of a dimly lit alley, engine idling. His shoulders slumped in exhaustion. His shift was done. 14 hours on the road. And his back ached like he was twice his age. He rubbed his temples, his eyes bloodshot and his hands calloused from gripping the wheel. The silence in the car pressed down on him like a physical weight. No music. No chatter. Just the low hum of the engine and the soft ticking of the dashboard clock. 12:43 a.m. He reached for the key, ready to shut it all down, when his radio crackled to life. Unit 17. We have a priority request, came the dispatcher's voice. Far too cheerful for this hour. Pickup requested at 118 West Maple Drive. No destination listed. Note says, please arrive as soon as possible. Daniel exhaled a long, tired sigh. Maple Drive. That's the Ridgeview Estates area, right? Correct. The voice replied. Client sounds distressed. Female. Mid-30s maybe. No further details. You want it? He closed his eyes for a moment. That part of town wasn't his usual route. It was a world of big gates, quiet streets, and houses that looked like they belonged in magazines no one actually lived in. But something in the dispatcher's tone, tight concern, nudged him. I'll take it, he said, his voice rough with fatigue. Headed there now. 10 minutes later. His tires rolled up the circular driveway of a mansion shrouded in shadow. The rain hadn't let up. It washed over the marble steps and down into the gutters, pooling like black mirrors around the wheels. Daniel turned off the engine, stepped out into the storm, and jogged toward the front door. There was no umbrella, no awning, just water and silence. He rang the bell. Seconds passed. Then a minute. He rang again. Finally. The door creaked open. She stood there barefoot, her blonde hair clinging to her face in wet strands. Her silk robe, cream-colored and soaked at the hem, hung loose over a nightgown that did little to hide her trembling. Her face was blotchy, her eyes red-rimmed. She looked like someone who had stopped pretending hours ago. Are you Daniel? She asked, her voice raw. He nodded slowly. Taxi service. You requested a pickup. She nodded but didn't move. Her hand clutched the edge of the door frame like she was holding on to the only stable thing in her world. I'm sorry, she said, her voice cracking. I didn't know who else to call. I don't want to go anywhere. She swallowed hard, tears spilling again. I just can't be alone tonight. Please. Could you just stay? Daniel blinked. The rain dripped from his hair, off the tip of his nose. He could feel his shirt clinging to his back, his socks already soaked through. But he didn't move. He looked at her. Really looked. She was terrified. Not in danger. Not hysterical. Just completely, utterly alone. I don't have anything to offer you, she added quickly, her eyes pleading. I don't know what else to do. For a moment, Daniel felt his body stiffen. He was a stranger. She didn't know him. He didn't know her. This was not how things worked. But then something flickered in her eyes, a desperation. A familiarity. A depth of pain that spoke to his own. He exhaled. A slow and heavy breath. The kind you take when you're about to step into something you don't understand but somehow already feel. He nodded once. Okay. He said quietly. I'll stay. Her shoulders sagged in relief. She stepped back, opening the door wider. Thank you, she whispered. As he stepped inside, he instinctively bent down and removed his wet shoes, leaving them in the entryway without a word. She glanced down at them, then back at him. A flicker of something soft passed across her face. You can sit in the living room or kitchen. Wherever. I just need to feel like someone else is breathing in this house. He nodded again. His voice low. That's okay. She turned and walked down the hallway, disappearing into the darkness beyond. He stood in the foyer for a moment, dripping, before moving forward. Each step quiet and careful. He didn't know her name. She didn't know his past. But as the door closed behind him and the rain kept pouring outside, Daniel knew this wasn't just another stop. Something had just begun. The house was beautiful, but it didn't feel alive. Daniel stepped carefully across polished hardwood floors that echoed with each footstep. Chandeliers loomed overhead, unlit and untouched. The walls bore expensive art, but none of it felt chosen with love. The air was heavy, too still, as if the house had been holding its breath for weeks. He found her in the living room, curled on a long white couch. Her robe had fallen off one shoulder, and she was hugging a throw pillow to her chest like it was an anchor. She didn't turn when he entered, only whispered, "You don't have to talk. I just didn't want the silence anymore." Daniel nodded. He set his damp jacket on a nearby chair, then moved to the kitchen without a word. The marble counters were spotless. It took him a moment to find the mugs. He boiled water, found some mint tea, and returned with 2 steaming cups, the steam curling into the dim air. When he placed one on the coaster beside her, she looked up briefly. Her eyes were hollow, ringed with shadows. "Thank you," she murmured. He sat in the armchair opposite her, his hands wrapped around the warm mug, waiting. Minutes passed. The rain beat a steady rhythm against the windows. Then, her voice, fragile and barely above a breath, broke the quiet. His name was Cole. Daniel looked at her gently. "My husband. He died 3 months ago. Car accident. They say it was fast. I still imagine him calling me before it happened. I don't know why I do that. He didn't. But I imagine it." She gave a bitter, mirthless laugh. "I thought I had time to grieve. But then Lily, our daughter, she started crying all night. Every night. Like she was mourning, too." Daniel listened, unmoving. "I haven't slept more than an hour at a time since he died. Every time she cries, something in me shatters. It's not just the sound. It's what it reminds me of. It's like a wound reopening again and again." She wiped her eyes with the sleeve of her robe. And then I started getting afraid of her. My own child. Can you imagine that? Daniel shook his head slowly. No. But I can understand being afraid of yourself. Her eyes snapped to him, surprised by the sound of his voice. I've been there. He added. Different reasons. Same silence. A sudden, muffled cry broke the stillness. Both their heads turned. From somewhere down the hall, the sound of a baby whimpering drifted through the air. Isabel stood up instinctively, then froze. Daniel saw it in her, the hesitation, the fear. Not because she didn't care, but because she was drowning. And the sound of her own daughter was the wave crashing over her. She looked at him, ashamed. She always wakes at this time. I try. But sometimes I just sit outside her door and wait for it to stop. And then I cry because what kind of mother does that? Daniel rose quietly. He walked past her and placed a hand gently on her shoulder as he passed. It was a soft, steady touch. Not pity. Not judgment. Just presence. In the hallway, the cries were getting louder. He didn't wait for permission. He opened the nursery door. Soft pink walls. A white crib. A mobile of stars hanging still. And in the center, a small girl. Blonde curls. Flushed cheeks. Tiny hands clenched in distress. Daniel stepped in, knelt beside the crib, and whispered, "Hey there, little one." Lily blinked through her tears, hiccuped, and stared at him. He reached down slowly, carefully. She didn't pull away. Isabel stood at the doorway, her hand covering her mouth, watching as Daniel gently lifted Lily into his arms. He rocked her, humming something old and low. A lullaby long buried in his memory. The child's cries quieted. And Isabel, just for a moment, breathed. Lily had fallen asleep in Daniel's arms. She was warm and small, her breath steadying as the tears faded one by one. Daniel sat in the nursery's rocking chair. The soft creak of the wood the only sound besides the rain whispering against the window. Isabel stood at the doorway, wrapped in silence, watching the stranger in her house cradle her daughter like she was made of porcelain and memories. After a few moments, she whispered, "You're good with her." Daniel didn't look up. He kept his gaze on the child in his arms, brushing a damp curl away from her cheek. "I used to be a dad," he said quietly. Isabel stepped inside the room, hesitating. She moved slowly, like approaching an animal in the wild, and sat down across from him on the low ottoman near the foot of the crib. He glanced at her, then returned his gaze to Lily. Her name was Ellie, he said. She had this wild laugh, like a hiccup and a howl at the same time. She liked dinosaurs and peanut butter. She called every green thing broccoli. Isabel managed a small smile as a tear slipped down her cheek. Daniel's face didn't soften. If anything, it grew stiller, heavier with memory. She got sick when she was 4. He continued. Congenital heart defect. We didn't know until it was almost too late. My wife and I. We tried everything. Hospital to hospital. Doctors. Specialists. But it was always a losing game. He exhaled. A slow, Shaky breath. I picked up 3 jobs. Drove nights. Slept maybe an hour a day. I used to nap in the hospital parking lot between shifts. She'd press her little hands against the glass when she saw me come through the doors. His voice wavered. She died a week after her 5th birthday. We had just saved enough for the surgery. Too late. Isabel brought a hand to her mouth. Her own grief momentarily eclipsed by his. My wife. She left not long after. Said she couldn't stay in a house filled with ghosts. I didn't blame her. But I couldn't leave either. So I stayed. With the silence. He looked down at Lily. Now sleeping peacefully against his chest. Her tiny fingers curled into his shirt. Sometimes I still hear her voice. He whispered. Calling me. Daddy. Clear as day. And when I wake up. There's nothing. Just the dark and the quiet and the ache in my ribs where she used to lie. Isabel pressed both hands over her heart. Her breath came in short. Sharp bursts. Her eyes glassy. That's what it feels like. She whispered. That's exactly what it feels like. He looked up at her then. And in that moment. 2 people who had never spoken before tonight. Who didn't know each other's last names. Sat in a room not as strangers. But as survivors of the same invisible storm. I thought I was the only one. Isabel's voice trembled. You're not. Daniel said. I keep thinking. She went on. If I were stronger. Better. Then maybe I could love her the way she deserves. But I look at her and I feel like I'm underwater. Like I'm screaming but it's all happening in slow motion. Daniel nodded. Grief's a thief. But shame's a liar. You love her. That's why it hurts. She covered her eyes. Trying not to fall apart. I don't know how to fix it. You don't. Daniel replied. You just hold on. You let the quiet pass through you. Not into you. And sometimes. You let someone else carry it for a while. Silence settled again. This time softer. Lily stirred slightly. Then stilled. Her face nestled into Daniel's chest. Her breathing was deep now. Peaceful. Isabel looked at her daughter. Then at the man holding her. You must have loved her so much. She said. We still do. He whispered. She nodded slowly. And then. Without thinking. Isabel reached forward and touched Daniel's hand. Not to comfort him. Not to be comforted. But to simply say. I see you. Their fingers stayed there. Barely touching. 2 people connected by pain. But no longer defined by it. And for the first time in weeks. The house didn't feel haunted. It felt full. The sky was still dark. But the rain had finally stopped. A gentle mist clung to the windows. Casting the world outside in soft gray. Inside the house. Everything was still. Daniel sat motionless in the nursery. Lily sound asleep against his chest. Her tiny hand still curled into the fabric of his shirt. As quietly as he could. He stood. Lily stirred. But did not wake. He walked down the hallway. Retracing steps he now knew by heart. He lowered Lily into her crib slowly. Placing her head gently against the plush bunny pillow at the corner. She shifted once. Sighed. And settled. He smiled and whispered. Sweet dreams. Little moon. He found Isabel on the couch, where she had drifted into a deep, exhausted sleep. A soft strand of blonde hair had fallen across her cheek. He knelt beside her. He reached for the throw blanket from the back of the couch and draped it over her gently. Then, in a quiet moment of instinct, he brushed that loose strand of hair behind her ear. He walked into the kitchen and pulled a notepad from a drawer. He tore off a single sheet. The pen glided with a slow, careful hand. Each letter deliberate. Each word chosen. He folded the note once and placed it on the edge of the coffee table beside her teacup. Then, without a sound, he slipped his shoes on, opened the front door, and stepped out into the pale, quiet morning. It was the sun, not an alarm or a cry, that stirred Isabel. Her eyes fluttered open slowly. For a moment, she blinked in confusion. Then, she noticed the warmth, the weight. Lily was nestled against her chest. Her small arm looped tightly around Isabel's waist, her head resting just beneath her collarbone. She was breathing deeply, peacefully, still asleep. Isabel froze. She hadn't held Lily like this in weeks. Yet here they were, entwined, whole. Her hands trembled slightly as she lifted them to wrap around her daughter. She held her close. Really close. And the tears came. Silent and steady, not tears of shame or fear, but of profound relief. Then her eyes caught the folded piece of paper on the table. She reached for it. Opening it, she read the simple, steady handwriting. You're not broken. You're just tired. So was I. D. She let out a shaky breath. The words sank deep, like a warm cloth over a raw wound. She pressed the note to her chest and looked at her daughter. No tears. No noise. Just peace. She whispered. Thank you. It wasn't clear if she meant it for Lily or for Daniel or both. But she said it again. Thank you. And for the first time in months, she wasn't afraid of the sound of her child waking up. The days that followed were not easy. But they were different. Isabel started to wake up before Lily cried. Not in panic, but in quiet readiness. She cooked for herself. She scheduled her first therapy session. And when the therapist asked what had shifted, Isabel simply said, someone came, then left, and reminded me I wasn't the only one. But she hadn't stopped thinking about Daniel. She kept the note in her nightstand. A constant reminder. It became a thread she had to follow. She needed to find him. After weeks of calling the taxi service and searching the city, she finally found him. His old green Crown Victoria was parked near a church kitchen, its trunk open. Daniel stood beside it, handing out brown paper bags to people in line. She stepped out of her car slowly, her heart pounding. She walked across the lot. And when he turned, their eyes met. He froze. She stopped in front of him. I looked for you, she said, her voice trembling. He blinked, his mouth parting just slightly. You found me? Tears welled in her eyes. I wasn't sure I would. He glanced past her and saw Lily in the back seat, waving shyly through the window. A soft smile flickered across his face. I wasn't sure I wanted to be found. He admitted. Isabel nodded. I get that. She stepped closer. Last time. She said gently. I begged you to stay. I was lost. And you. You didn't fix me. But you reminded me I wasn't gone. Daniel's eyes softened. You fixed yourself. She shook her head. One tear slipping free. I started to. She looked down. Then met his gaze. This time. She said. Her voice firming. I'm not asking you to stay the night. I'm asking you to stay for whatever this becomes. Not just tonight. But the days after. The ones where it's still hard. And the ones where it's not. He stared at her. Really looked at her. The storm inside her was quieter now. Still there. But no longer drowning her. She was steady. Strong. Healing. Daniel let out a slow breath and nodded. I'd like that. Isabel smiled through her tears. So would I. 1 year later. The mansion, once cold and echoing, was now the headquarters of the Morning Light Foundation. A non-profit Isabel had built to support mothers suffering from postpartum depression. It was filled not with luxury, but with life. Daniel, no longer just a driver, coordinated the foundation's fieldwork. A reliable, warm presence for every family he helped. They had rebuilt what pain had once destroyed. Choosing each other every day. At the foundation's 1-year anniversary celebration, Daniel stood on a small stage. The garden was glowing with string lights, filled with the very families they had helped. He looked straight at Isabel. When I met Isabel, he began. She was holding herself together by the thinnest thread. I thought I was there to help her. But the truth is, she helped me more. He glanced at Lily, who was smiling up at him from the grass. She helped both of us. I had a daughter once. He said softly. His voice steady. And for a long time, I thought that part of my life was over. But then came a rainy night. A front porch. And a cry for help that echoed inside me. And in that moment, I realized maybe it wasn't over. Maybe it was just waiting. He stepped down from the stage. Walked slowly toward her. And then he knelt. Gasps rippled across the crowd. That night, you saved me from myself, he said. His eyes full of a love born from the trenches of grief and grace. You gave me a place to stand when I was sinking. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. He opened it. Inside was a simple, beautiful ring with a tiny, glowing moonstone. Isabel, will you be the home I come back to for the rest of my life? Tears streamed down her cheeks. She nodded. Hands trembling. Yes. She whispered. Then louder. Smiling through her tears. Yes. Lily squealed and ran toward them, flinging her arms around both of their necks as the crowd erupted into applause. Epilogue, 4 years later. The morning sun streamed into a kitchen that smelled of pancakes and coffee. Daniel stood at the stove, flipping a pancake into the air, making a 7-year-old Lily giggle with delight. Isabel sat at the wooden table, a gentle hand resting on her rounded belly, a soft smile on her face as she watched them. The grand mansion had been sold. They lived here now, in a modest, Light-filled house with a sprawling backyard and a swing set Daniel had built himself. The Morning Light Foundation thrived in a dedicated downtown office. But this was their sanctuary. Daniel slid a plate of pancakes in front of Lily. "For my little moonbeam," he said, ruffling her hair. He walked over to Isabel and placed a soft kiss on her forehead, his hand joining hers on her stomach. "He's kicking," she whispered, her eyes shining. "He just wants pancakes." Daniel chuckled, his voice full of a deep, settled contentment. They stood there for a moment. A family bathed in sunlight. There were no more ghosts. No more suffocating silences. The rain had passed long ago. And in its place, a garden had grown vibrant, resilient, and full of life. They were no longer fragments pieced together. They were whole. A testament to the fact that sometimes the deepest losses make way for the most profound love. And a single rainy night can be the start of a lifetime of sunny mornings. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that even the quietest moments can change a life, please subscribe to Soul-Stirring Stories. Here, we share tales that reach beyond the noise and straight into your heart. Until next time, may you find comfort in connection and hope, even in the rain.